Well, hello, friends. Welcome to today's 220-1202 A+ study group. It's our Core 2 study group. Let's put up our lower thirds. Let's pause this video because it's confusing me. There's lots of things moving at one time. I'm seeing myself. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. Hello, chat room. Chat room was in here early today. You know, we're doing a very unusual Friday. I say an unusual Friday live stream. Although, didn't we do a Friday live stream in November? I think we did. So it's becoming less unusual. It's becoming more usual, usual-ish. I don't like necessarily to do Friday live streams, but it adds like a little bit of more casual type something to it. There's a little bit of a casual flavor to it because it's Friday. But we still have the same content, the same questions. I've got everything ready to go. We're in good shape. In fact, it sort of is, I'm used to doing these on a Tuesday or Thursday for A+. So to me, it's Thursday, but it's not Thursday. It's Friday. So that's my problem, not yours. That's a me problem, not a you problem. And it's so hot today here in Central Florida. It should be in the 80s today. Here in January, at the beginning of January. But it will get cold. It'll get so cold next week. It'll be in the 50s. I know. Sorry. I apologize. It's a little gloating. There's a little bit. There's a lot. There's a lot of gloating that goes on. But that's why I'm here. I am not made for the cold. I would not survive. I'm the first one to tell you that I would not be able to do it. I've lived in Florida my whole life. I don't even understand what cold is. Really. I really don't. I think you'd have to spend a winter somewhere. You have to spend a winter in Montana to really appreciate winter. And I'm not going to do that. So I will go through my life never worrying about that part. We've got all brand new A+ questions for you today. And I know this because I just wrote them this week. It's been a busy weekend. It seems like a lot of things are happening all at once. I've got, just when I think I have everything lined up, I'm like, okay, now we're in a good place. I'm in a place where I can make it. Then a bunch of wrenches get thrown into the mix. So if someone can help me with that. Oh, look, I'm noticing way out in the Caribbean that Malk is here. Hope you're doing well. Boy, the chat room really took a while to catch up to it, didn't it? We got it going on here. Did you see it go floop? Went just like that. Feel like I missed something. Hope everybody's doing well. Everybody's doing all right. Everybody, welcome back. Let's see if I'm now live. It says no data still. All right. How are we sounding and looking? That was quite a untimely event. We are so back. Nothing like a power outage to get things started for the day. It's very interesting. Here's the problem. I will tell you exactly why there was a power outage today, 5 minutes before I was to go live. The reason the power was out is because I ordered a UPS for my ONT, my optical network terminal, which is in another part of the house, another part of the studio and the whole thing. That does not have a battery backup. It is the only part of my internet connection that does not have a battery backup. And I didn't realize that it was installed that way. And then So I ordered a UPS. It's a DC type UPS. I'll show it in the after show if you're interested. It should arrive today, but I ordered it. And I thought, well, that will guarantee an outage before I get it. There it is. There's the outage. So we're back up and running, though. It was a very quick outage. We were down for about a minute, but then everything, of course, has to reboot and get everything back. So thank you for hanging in there. That's, did I say the streams were like, we were all laid back and everything was good? It was laid back. I just noticed click. I just noticed, boom, things started turning off. One of my cameras, the one that you are looking at, I call this my bird cam because it's up behind me, up in a nest. And that one is also not on a UPS, which now makes me think a standalone UPS over there would be a great idea. So I've got to get another UPS for that. And then we would be 100% up and running as long as the ISP is not involved in the power outage, and then we're okay. So that's what's going on. So if you received an email from me saying, hey, we're live and it's time for the study group, and I wasn't here, that's why. I was not here. Didn't work out. So we're good. For the moment, we're now back up and running. If this happens again anytime in the next 2 hours, then we'll have another outage, I'm afraid. But I'm working there's always a place. We talk about, probably in Security Plus, we talk a lot about redundancy and how you could make everything redundant upon redundant upon redundant. But at some point, there's too much money that you're investing in the redundancy to make it worth the while. So that is one where, in this case, that's not exactly the situation. The situation is that I've not done the work to determine where the weak spots are, and only now I'm starting to correct those. So anyway, we got about less than a minute, 30 seconds to go before we get started. We'll cross our fingers and hope everything goes fine. I'm sure it will. I'm sure everything is good. We'll do a quick check of all of nothing in my studio went down. Everything in the studio, except for the backlights that you see in the camera behind me, everything was working. So that part I like. And when power came back on, I didn't have to touch anything. In fact, YouTube did a great job of reconnecting, which that was a test I did not want to run, but one that did work just fine. Top of the hour, everyone. Let's see if we can do a live stream now. What do you think? I think we can do it. Let's make this happen. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2026 Professor Messer 220-1202 Core 2 A+ study group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you know your objectives and you know this content, you're going to do just fine at getting this entire Q&A session really 100%. I'm looking forward to seeing your numbers as we go through all of these. You can also interactively join us online. That's something that is great. If you are here live, I would love for you to join us live. There's your instructions. You go to professormesser.com/QA and you can join us live. You can see what type of questions we will post there. You can stay on that single page and the questions will change on that page as we go. Just to see if you are indeed looking at the right information on that page, I have for you a question that I will put up on this page so that you can follow along with the questions that are there, and you can tell me what you think the answer might be. Just as a reminder for everyone, as we go through our live stream today, the link you want to use for your answers is the one on the screen here, professormesser.com/QA. Please do not put answers in the chat room. Please do not put any hints in the chat room. This rewind question is the only question you will get today that is one that we've done before. This is really just a check to see if everything does what we want it to do. The question asks, a laptop is powered down unexpectedly after the battery was depleted. Which of the following would validate the integrity of the file system after restarting? Would it be WinVer, GP Update, CHKDSK, SFC, or Shutdown? It's got to be one of those, right? So if you think you know the answer, again, no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your question, and we will come back to this question in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. For a while there, I didn't think I would be joining you. Those of you that were in the pre-show know that everything dropped out about 5 minutes before we were gone because we lost power. So if we lose power sometime in the middle of this, I'll have to get on my mobile devices, let you know what's going on. So bear with us today as we work through these electrical challenges that are outside the scope of our control, but we'll make the best of it. Of course, you can join us when we are not here live at any time by following us online at any of these links and many others. ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube is our entire video training course. We also have ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter and /X. They go to the same place these days. And Instagram. This is also good places to go to get our daily A+ pop quiz questions. So we have a little bit more to step through. Of course, we have other social media sites that you can find us on. You simply type ProfessorMesser.com/ the name of the site that you would like to join us. And hopefully we have something there that you can do. You can find us on that particular site. If I'm not on your favorite social media site, let me know. Maybe we should get over there and put some things there. It's an easy thing to do. Before we go back to that question we asked earlier, I also want to remind you that somewhere in the first hour of this live stream, I'm going to give you instructions on how you could earn a 1-hour webinar category CEU. This is a continuing education unit credit. It is something that people will use to renew their certification. You can also use this with some third parties to help provide some type of ongoing training and ongoing knowledge transfer. But just listen in sometime during this first hour. I will give you all of the details during that time, and I'll give you the complete instructions on what you need to do. So listen out for that. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about the 220-1202 exam. Sometimes you'll see this referred to as the version 15 exam. It was released in March of 2025, almost a year old now, still a couple months short of that, which means it should retire somewhere around September of 2028. As we get closer to that date in 2028, I will certainly let you know that is going to happen. We'll get more specific dates from CompTIA about that time, but that's a pretty good estimate. The exam itself for the 1202 is on a scale from 100 to 900, and the score that you need to earn is a 700. So a little bit more than the 675 that you would need for the 1201. So I wouldn't say it's a harder exam, but they are expecting just a little bit more and get that 700 score. Once you pass both of these exams, both the Core 1 and the Core 2, your certification's now good for 3 years. So although we talk a lot about retirement dates and release dates, as soon as you earn your certification, none of these dates matter to you. Those are only for people taking the exam, and at that point, you will not be taking the exam anymore. You will be A+ certified. Today, we're going to specifically be talking about topics that come from the 220-1202 exam, including operating systems, security, software troubleshooting, operational procedures, and potpourri. The potpourri part maybe we'll talk about in a bit, but that is another thing that you could do. Also let you know that this live stream will be available for replay immediately after we're done on our YouTube channel. We also create a podcast audio-only version that's there and available. You can find that at ProfessorMesser.com/podcast. We have links there that you could add to your favorite podcast listening program for our A+ study groups, Network Plus, and Security Plus. About a day after we're done, you'll notice the YouTube video description has also been updated with detailed timestamps telling you everything that we do throughout the entire study group. They are made available thanks to the hard work of my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this on the replay. If this is something that you use and you like, make sure you hit maybe a heart for Lori in the chat room there. She is going through and manually putting in all of these timestamps. That is the only way you can be assured that you're getting the highest quality and the most accurate timestamps is with a human. So I'm pretty proud of that. So this is something that we've done for years, and I think it helps a lot of people find the information they're looking for. This will be part of every YouTube video description for our live stream study groups. We also have our 24/7 chat. We have a Discord server. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. This is where we hang out. We're not live on YouTube. We're live on Discord. You can find out more at ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. We have thousands of people there that are studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and others. And there's usually an interesting conversation going on in the general chat as well. It's not just about certifications after all. And so that's something you might want to check out. Join us over there. I'll be over there when we're done here, professormesser.com/Discord. At some point, you will need to take your exam. That's how you get certified. You must sit down and take both of the A+ exams. Of course, you could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price to take these exams, but why would you do that when I have discounted vouchers for anyone who's located in the U.S. or Canada that you can find at professormesser.com/vouchers. You don't need a special code. You don't need to add anything to your browser. I don't make you jump through any hoops. You simply visit that URL, and all of the vouchers are discounted. That's it. It's that simple. If that's something you might want to use, you might want to check out that link. We have them for all of the CompTIA exams. Also let you know that we have my Exam Hacks ebook that I include with this for free. That's something you can't get anywhere else. So a little exclusivity for those of you getting the voucher. You can only get the Exam Hacks ebook with the purchase of one of our vouchers or the purchase of a success bundle on our website. Something you might want to check out. Find out more at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's look at that question we asked about earlier, which was, a laptop is powered down unexpectedly after the battery was depleted. Which of the following would validate the integrity of the file system after restarting? Would it be WinVer, GP update, check disk, SFC, or shutdown? Let's close our poll and see how you did with this one. 56% of you say the answer is check disk. 43% of you say the answer is SFC. This is very similar to the answers we got last week, by the way. We also have 2% that said shutdown, and 0% said GP update, and 0% said WinVer. So one of the things that was a key with this question was what we were checking. This is something I'm sure that's happened to a lot of people. You're on your laptop, you're on your mobile device, the battery's getting lower, you're trying to get things done, your battery's getting lower, and then it just can't power it anymore, and everything shuts down. Ooh, there we go. Screen goes dark. Now we have to plug in, we have to replace the battery, we have to get more power. When we power back up, how do we know that the file system is still in good shape, that there was no corruption during this unexpected outage? Because it simply shut off. We didn't turn it off and have it go through its graceful shutdown process. This was a very ungraceful shutdown, and because of that, it would be good to check to see if the file system and all of the indices that are used to find all of the files on our system are accurate and are representing what the actual data is on the storage drive. Well, one of the ways that you would do that is to use a program known as check disk. This checks the logical file system of that particular drive. So this is one that will check the index. It'll make sure that the files on the drive match the index that you're having. Think of it as a book. Imagine if the index at the front of your book, or in this case, the table of contents in the front of your book, did not match the pages that were in the rest of the book. That's the problem that you have with these file systems, is occasionally they can get mixed up, especially if there's been an unexpected outage. So CheckDisk does a great job of going through and checking to make sure that the integrity of the file system is exactly what we would expect, that it is perfectly 100% up and running. This also can look at physical errors on the storage drive itself. So you can check and make sure that you're able to read and write from every sector on that particular storage device. This is something, if you're concerned that maybe the storage device maybe it's older, maybe you think it's not performing well, maybe you just want to give it a check, you might want to run CheckDisk with the /R that will locate any of those bad sectors. If it does find a bad sector, it will try to recover as much data as possible from that bad sector and save it somewhere else on the drive so that that data will continue to be safe. This also runs during startup, especially if a system is locked. You usually like to have the file system available so that nothing is being written to that file system as you are checking it. And so during startup, it will go through. You may have even seen this image where it's going through and scanning and repairing the file system that is there. So that is CheckDisk. That is the answer we were looking for. That is the majority of you answered this, 56%. 43%, which is a very large number, said the answer is SFC, the System File Checker. The System File Checker is one that checks for the Windows files themselves to make sure that nothing has modified the Windows files. but it doesn't check your overall file system. It doesn't go outside the scope of your primary Windows installation files. It only looks at Windows. So if you suddenly have a power op, you're also concerned about all of the other documents and things that you've stored on that storage drive. Check disk would be the best way to check on that. It's the only way to confirm that the file system still is working properly. You can think of the check disk as checking and making sure your table of contents is set up properly with the information that's in the book. SFC is going to specific pages in the book to make sure that nobody's changed any of the text on any of those pages. So a little different in its scope. They sound very similar, but they are very different in what they're checking and the information that they are confirming. Make sure you're familiar with both of those and what those differences might be. Shutdown's a great answer. I can't take this anymore. Just turn it off. That may be one way to avoid the problem entirely, but it doesn't do anything to check the integrity of the file system. So shutting down will not necessarily solve any of these problems. Nobody chose WinVer, which shows you the version of Windows that you're running. Obviously, that's not going to check anything in your file system. And a GP update is taking your Windows, especially in a corporate environment, and taking any group policies and updating systems across the network with specific policies. That doesn't have anything with checking the integrity of the file system either. So there you go. You've now got a couple of things to consider and think about, especially since all of these topics come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you are familiar with all of them. Well, that's the only older question you're going to see in our study group today. So I want to give you your first new question of the study group. And as many of you know, the first new question is not a multiple choice question. The question we just had was multiple choice because there was a question and there were multiple answers that you could have chosen. But as you're probably aware, the exam itself is not going to give you 100% multiple choice questions. The first handful of questions you get on your exam are not multiple choice. Well, if they're not multiple choice, what are they? They are what CompTIA calls a performance-based question. And what that really means is that they are anything but multiple choice. It's just easier to say performance-based question instead of calling it the anything but multiple choice question. But that's really what they're giving you, is a handful of those. Multiple choice questions we're familiar with. We know that there's a question and multiple answers to choose from. With performance-based questions, the questions can be presented in any way. They might be a fill in the blank. It might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a function. It might be a matching question. It might be a drag and drop question. However you can think of asking a question to someone, that's how they might ask that of you. So there's no standard format. There's no standard set of parameters that you could consider. In fact, they might ask you the question a lot of different ways. The important thing to keep in mind, though, is it doesn't matter how they ask the question. All of the information that you'll need to know is still coming directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. And if you know your exam objectives, then you're going to do fine no matter how they ask the question. So I know you're going to do fine with this one as well. Let's do our performance-based question of the month. This one is a matching question, and this question asks, select the best Windows utility for the task. I have for you on the screen 4 tasks, and I have 7 Windows utilities. Already, there's a difference in the number here, you'll notice, which means that there will be 4 answers that we will choose, 4 utilities that we will choose. There will be 3 utilities we do not use. This, by the way, is a very common way for the exam to ask questions like this so that you could get all of them wrong because you're not just choosing 4 utilities for 4 scenarios. They make it a little bit harder than that. So I thought I'd make it harder than that for you as well. For those of you listening in, let's step through all of these tasks. They are: apply a standard password policy for all corporate accounts. The next task is remove all downloaded program files from a Windows server. We also have an intranet server is showing an error in the corporate browser. And the last task is remove all data from a Windows volume. The utilities that I would like you to choose from are Disk Defragmenter, Certificate Manager, Disk Cleanup, Registry Editor, Group Policy Editor, Disk Management, and Task Scheduler. If you think you know the answers, you can put your answer in the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Hopefully, if you know just all 4 of these, I just want the 4 utilities that it might be. Make sure you remember what you chose. This obviously is not a multiple choice, so I won't be showing a summary at the end, but you will have an idea, of course, of what these might be. Make sure you're familiar with them. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to instead go to the link on your screen, professormusser.com/QA, to be able to answer this question. So far, so good. Let's see how well we know some of these Windows utilities. Last month, we had a different performance-based question. We have a different performance-based question every month, of course. And we looked at the output of some command line utilities. These are not command line utilities. These are the built-in Windows utilities. So this is a little bit different on how we will work through these. This might be a good one to consider, especially if you are not familiar with Windows. Some of you come from a Mac OS background. Some of you run Linux. Some of you maybe not familiar with computers at all. All of these utilities may be relatively new. So one of the things we do in our video course is we show you what this utility is. We talk about why it's important, and then we demonstrate it, which I think is an important part of this. So make sure you check out all of the demonstrations. We have one for every single utility that we have inside of the CompTIA exam objectives. That might be a good one to break down and understand more about. Let's see how you're doing. I'm seeing a number of people submitting their answers already. I'm looking at the numbers on my side, but I'm not looking at the answers yet. I try not to look at your answers until you have submitted them. So let's now step through each one of these utilities or the tasks and see what utility we would match with it. So we should, in fact, I'm going to very quickly show this to you on this side because I'm looking at the next screen that I have. And it just puts everything up on the screen. That's not how I would like to do this for you. I would like to show one at a time. So now, of course, I have to build in a view of this to get all of these in here. There we go. Let's see if I can make some magic happen. Now, let's start with all of these different utilities and what we would use for each one of these. So the first one on our list is apply a standard password policy for all corporate accounts. If you work in a corporate environment, you're probably familiar with this. You're probably familiar with setting up certain policies and then pushing those policies down to all of the Windows computers in your environment. It could be argued that this really is the secret sauce of Windows. This is really what made Windows the big behemoth in the enterprise, because you could sit at your desk and literally manage any Windows desktop in the entire organization, regardless of where it happens to be. That's some pretty powerful stuff. The utility that you would use to make this happen would be the group policy editor. The Windows environment takes a lot of focus because you're doing everything in one central user database called Active Directory. Active Directory has a lot of things that it stores, but one of the features that it provides is the ability to take a centralized management of all of these individual devices through the use of something known as group policy. It does exactly what the name implies. You can set policies for large groups of devices and individuals. And you can, of course, break these out into individual organizational units, they call them OUs. So you could have certain policies for everyone in the organization and other policies that might apply to an individual, or policies that might apply to everyone in the accounting department or the shipping and receiving department. You have choices on how you structure this. It can be a very complex structure for this Active Directory for us, just something to consider. But Group Policy Editor is the thing that really does help you understand how to set these policies and push these policies out to all of those devices. Next on our list is remove all downloaded program files from a Windows server. If you are working on even a Windows workstation, when you download files, they're usually stored in this download folder. And if you're like me, the download folder, after a very short period of time, is very, very large. There are a lot of downloaded files in that, and it takes up a lot of storage space. So you might want to clear these out every once in a while, because once you've downloaded it and used it or installed it or done something with it, it may not be something that you need on your system any longer. So it might be a good idea to delete it. Well, how can you simply click one button and delete all of these on your system with a Windows utility? The best choice for this would be Disk Cleanup. Disk Cleanup has a feature inside of it specifically to remove all of these files in your downloaded folder, along with temporary files, files that may be duplicates. There's a lot of things that the Disk Cleanup can do for you. I've run it many times because you've gotten where you need to perform a function and then it tells you your drive space is getting low. And you're thinking, oh, how am I going to clean this out quickly? I'll just run Disk Cleanup, have it go through and remove temporary files, and it will tell you how many files it will be removing. You can certainly look at our video on Disk Cleanup and you can see us demonstrate that. You'll see exactly what your options might be. A valuable tool and one that can easily delete all of those downloaded files from your device, whether it's a Windows workstation or a Windows server. So one of the nice things about Windows is there's a lot of compatibility and consistency between those different operating systems. Number 3 on our list is an intranet server is showing an error in the corporate browser. This is something that I've run into a lot on intranets, especially where there might be a problem with the certificate that is on that server. Maybe it's a certificate we created internally. Maybe we've not pushed out the trusted certificates to each individual device. So maybe we need to check that in our certificate manager. Certificate manager will show you all of the certs that were installed by default on that system. And it also allows you to add, remove, or change certificates that you might have on that computer as well. Especially if you're building your own internal servers and you are self-signing these certificates. That means the certificate was not signed by one of these public and well-known certificate providers. It's something you just did internally. Well, since you did it internally, your Windows workstation will have no idea who signed this certificate. So you have to put that signing cert that is on that system so they know that as well. This might be useful to be familiar. Let's also look at our last option, remove all data from a Windows volume. That's a little extreme, but there are times when you may want to choose an individual volume on your Windows computer and tell Windows just delete everything that's there. One of the easiest ways to do that from a utility perspective, you can certainly do it at the command line. And there are a lot of utilities you can use at the command line. But if you want to look at this, disk management does this. You can go directly into the disk management utility and be able to describe what the Windows volume, it shows you all your Windows volumes. You can click on a volume and choose to format that volume or delete that volume. And now you've removed all of that data. One very quick and easy way to do it using the available Windows utilities that are there. That is where we focus, is those specific things. Of course, we did not use disk defragmenter. So those of you that are still using spinning hard drives, I certainly am. I have a very large drive array that has a bunch of spinning drives in it. You may want to run disk defragmenter to take all the fragments of files, put them together into one contiguous form that improves both the reading and writing of files and documents to that drive. We also did not choose Registry Editor. Registry Editor is a centralized database on a single device for Windows that holds pretty much all of your Windows configuration options. This is a centralized database. It is something that you do need to become familiar with, and I will warn you now, do not make changes to your registry unless you have a backup of that particular section of the registry. There is a backup function built into Registry Editor that allows you to quickly back that up. And then make sure that when you're making the change that you are making a change that you are familiar with. You can very easily find a problem or create a problem by making changes within the registry. So make sure you are familiar when you're working through this. Last one on our list is Task Scheduler. Task Scheduler, just like the name implies, allows you to set a certain date and time to run certain applications, programs, or utilities on your Windows computer. So if you need a backup to start at 3 in the morning, you can set up Task Scheduler and it will do exactly that for you. So there's the answers we were looking for. Group Policy Editor applied a standard password policy for all corporate accounts. Disk Cleanup is used to remove all downloaded program files from a Windows server. Certificate Manager allows us to take an intranet server that is showing an error in the corporate browser and hopefully resolve that problem. And if you need to remove all data from a Windows volume, Disk Management does that for you. Some folks in the chat room were saying, why did you use this terminology, remove all downloaded program files from a Windows server? You're making this hard. It's a trick question. How dare you? Well, that's because that's what Microsoft calls it inside of the disk cleanup utility. Don't believe me? Go start disk cleanup on your computer right now. It literally says remove all downloaded program files. So that's why I chose it. Is it clunky language? It is. Why is it there? I'm not trying to fool you. That's what it says inside of disk cleanup. So although I can certainly take the blame, and I have plenty of questions where I have messed up the words, didn't do it on this one. I intentionally chose those words because those are the words used inside of the utility itself, for better or for worse. Sometimes I want to change the questions that I write because I myself feel that it's not as specific as it should be. But then I also have to think about this might be what you get on the actual exam. So I try to balance that. So sometimes when you see something that seems clunky or it's worded oddly, it's not because I meant it to be that way. It's because that's the way that you may probably see that on your exam as well. So that's why another example of one of those. It's one of those that I have to kind of balance myself. So I didn't change it. Hopefully that you'll work through that. Let's now look at another question. Let's go back to multiple choice, shall we? Now that you did great on your performance-based question, let's do another question. This one specifically is a multiple choice that asks, a user has performed a search on the Google website, but the results page is from a completely different search engine. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would this be an incorrect certificate? Would it be malware? Would it be a pop-up blocker is enabled? Would it be that OS updates are pending? Or is it a proxy configuration error? This is one where there might be more than one technical answer for this one, but only one is which of the following would be the most likely reason. So again, if you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. Maybe we'll bounce back on this one. I think this one is actually also worded a little nicer than the last question, and that maybe is intentional. We'll figure out the details as we step through it. This is also a scenario that is specifically listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. If you don't have a copy of those objectives, stick around. We will tell you at the end of our first hour how you can get your hands on these objectives. They are a great checklist to use for your studies. If you don't have it already, you will certainly want to make sure you download and have that available on your system. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a user has performed a search on the Google website, but the results page is from a completely different search engine. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be an incorrect certificate? Would it be malware? Would it be that a pop-up blocker is enabled? Would it be that OS updates are pending? Or would it be a proxy configuration error? Let's close our poll and see how we did with this one. 52% of us, that's certainly a majority, say the answer is malware. 34% say it's a proxy configuration error. 9% say it's an incorrect certificate. 5% say pop-up blocker is enabled. And nobody said that OS updates are pending. I do like to put questions in that seem reasonable when you start looking at them, but occasionally there will be a question in there that is completely unreasonable, and that is a completely unreasonable one. Usually this is something that is going to the attacker's search engine or pointing them somewhere else. And in fact, if you did choose that malware was the issue, you would be absolutely correct. It would be malware as the most likely reason for this. Why would that be? Well, that's because you might have browser redirection. The attackers know that they might be able to reconfigure your operating system so that the normal search engine that you would normally use is now going somewhere else. You didn't set it for this new search engine. The malware set it for this new search engine. This is one because the folks that are attacking your system that have embedded the malware on this computer have an agreement with that particular search engine to give them a little bit of a kickback. So they're earning money as these ads are popping up on the screen as you're looking at the search engine. That's how they end up making money from putting malware on your system. So you will want to clean this system with some anti-malware or antivirus software, and you want to perhaps even better restore from a known good backup. That's probably the best option, by the way, is exactly that, restoring from a known good backup. If you are someone who is trying to solve this particular problem, it's almost always going to be related to malware on this computer. But why would it not be one of these others? 34% of you say the answer could have been proxy configuration error. Configurations of a proxy, of course, is designed to be a middleman between you and usually the outside world, and in some cases the inside world, depending on the type of proxy that you're using. But in this particular case, let's assume that we're using the proxy to go to the internet and be able to access search engines. The proxy configuration is one that is designed to take you to the site that you specifically chose, and it doesn't change your URL to be a completely different browser. That's not something that is commonly done. Could a proxy be configured for this? There are certain types of proxies that can be configured to rewrite the URL. URL rewriting is what you would commonly see that referred to, but URL rewriting is not something that you commonly do. And it's certainly not a feature on every proxy that you will find. And it is certainly not the most likely reason for this, especially if you're trying to go to Google. Who's going to rewrite Google? Sorry, you can't go to Google. There's no good business case for you to go to Google. That's probably not the case. Everybody needs access to Google, it seems. So that's not one where we would commonly create a URL rewrite for something like that. So if there was a proxy configuration error, maybe the proxy is configured on an incorrect port number, so that you're not able to access the proxy. Maybe the proxy isn't configured to authenticate properly. There's all kinds of things that would go wrong at the proxy level, but usually when you misconfigure a proxy, the proxy isn't working. And because of that, you get no website. In this case, that was not the problem we ran into. We got the wrong website. Probably not a proxy configuration error, certainly not the most likely reason for that, given the other options that are available. An incorrect certificate would show us on a server that server was untrusted. So an incorrect certificate helps us know if the site we're going to is trusted or not, at least at an encryption level. But the certificate itself is not really going to redirect us to a different site. So it would not be an incorrect certificate that is causing that. Pop-up blocker being enabled. Pop-up blockers would stop a website from popping up on your screen, but it wouldn't stop it from going to a third-party website. That's not what a pop-up blocker does, so that would not be the answer. And OS updates are pending. Obviously, we want to keep our system updated. We want to be sure we have the latest updates on our system, on our computer. But just because you haven't updated the operating system doesn't somehow mean that Google is now pointing to a different website. That would be a disaster. Maybe everybody would keep their systems updated if that was the case, but not in this particular scenario. The answer in this case, the most likely reason, is the one that 52% of you chose. It is indeed malware. That was the answer that we were looking for. Let's do another question, another multiple choice question for those of you. This one is one that asks more about scripting. The question specifically says, a system administrator is using an identical script on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it Python, PowerShell, Shell script, batch file, or VB script? Got a few to choose from here. A system administrator is using an identical script on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it Python, PowerShell, Shell script, batch file, or VB script? If you know the answer, go to the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See how we do. So this is one where scripting is an important part of the Core 2 exam. There's a whole section on scripting. All of these script types are in that section. That's something I like to do in my questions, is to give you answers that are real things and they're taken directly from the exam objectives. That way we can not just understand the right answers and why the right answers are right. When we're going through the wrong answers, we're also refreshing what we know about these topics that could appear on your exam as another question. So another one that you might want to choose from that configuration. Let's see how you did with this one. A system administrator is using an identical script on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Which of the following is most likely being used? Is it Python, PowerShell, Shell script, batch file, or VB script? We will stop our poll. Let's see what we chose. Here we go. 58% of you say the answer is Python. 17% say the answer is a shell script. 11% say a batch file. And then a tie for last place, 7% for PowerShell, 7% for VB script. Now, 58% is a pretty good number, and indeed, 58% that chose Python got this one absolutely correct. That is the answer that we were looking for, but why is that the right answer? Well, first, let's look at Python and what we would use this for. If you see Python, it will have usually a .py extension so that you can specify that it is, you can see immediately that's a Python file that we would use. And the part that is interesting here is that Python has become extremely popular, obviously, most recently, and it's something that can be used across multiple operating systems, in some cases without any modifications whatsoever. So the same script could potentially run on Linux, on Mac OS, and on Windows without any changes at all. Well, obviously, this would be a script that probably is not referencing something specific to that operating system, but doing something that's a little broader in scope. It would really be sort of unusual to have a single script that you could run across all of those. But if you were going to do it, Python would be the language that would allow you to run that particular script. There are other options that we had here. Why would it not be any of these others? There is a critical piece of this question, and that is that the system administrator is using an identical script, a bit-for-bit exact duplicate of that script. This is an unusual thing. So let's look at the scripts that we have here. 17% said a shell script. Shell scripts are commonly describing a script that you would run at a Linux command prompt. The command prompt in Linux is a shell. That's what we refer to that particular working environment as. And if you would like to use a different shell as your command line, you can pick the shell that you like to use the most. That shell that's there with the shell script is the one that really becomes something very Linux related. Shell scripts are also used in Mac OS because Mac OS does have a Unix type of background. So both Linux and Mac OS could have a identical script, but that shell script, if you took it into Windows, would not work. So that is not one that we would work through either. That's why shell script, very Linux-ish, but definitely not Windows-ish. So you would not use a shell script inside of Windows. If you were in Windows, you would be using a similar but different kind of script known as a batch file. That's what we refer to effectively the same thing in Windows. It just has a different name. Batch files are specific to a Windows command prompt. And this is something that you would run to be able to make that happen. The batch files that you would run at a command prompt are there to provide really a way that you can run shells or batch files that you've been using for years to be able to work through those. Batch files are very useful for that, but batch files you can't run that batch file in Linux. You can't run that batch file in Mac OS. It's not something that will be identical between both of those. So batch file would not be the answer. That is Windows only. And that's why that would be the case. Speaking of Windows only, PowerShell is also Windows only. PowerShell is a Windows-specific utility, a command prompt, a shell in itself that allows you to not only run similar scripts that you would run as a batch file at the command prompt, but PowerShell, as the name implies, gives you additional capabilities. It gives you access to the operating system itself. You can reference the registry. You can look at services. You can manipulate those registries and services. That's something you can't easily do from the generalized command prompt inside of Windows when you run a batch file. So PowerShell really is what most system administrators in Windows will use to be able to automate a number of functions within Windows, because you can specifically change Windows operating systems directly inside of a PowerShell script. But PowerShell is Windows only. PowerShell scripts don't work in Linux. PowerShell scripts do not work in Mac OS. And lastly, we have VB script, Visual Basic. Visual Basic is a Windows type of technology. It was written by Microsoft, used by Microsoft operating systems, and used by Microsoft utilities. If you're setting up and running a script inside of Excel or Word, you're probably using VB script, although VB script itself is something that is slowly being phased out. You won't see as much VB script as any of these other types, certainly, and it is Windows only. It doesn't run in Linux. It doesn't run in Mac OS. The only answer here that makes any sense, the one that is certainly the most likely of all of these, would indeed be Python, and 58% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as you've already seen, we've got a lot of different technologies we've already discussed. We've talked about networking and Windows and utilities and scripting and a lot of other pieces. There's a lot you have to know to be able to sit down and take the A+ Core 1 or the A+ Core 2 exam. Now, of course, we have videos that we have created that cover every single topic from the official CompTIA exam objectives. These are comprehensive videos that we have created that go right through the checklist. And you may want to sit down and watch all 137 of our A+ videos over 19 hours, but maybe you don't have time to go through 137 of them, or maybe you think you're pretty familiar with a particular topic. Maybe you can skip one, or once you've watched them all, how do you remember all of the information that was there? One of the ways that you can do this is by taking advantage of our course notes. Our course notes are a way that you can have a summary of all of the text, all of the important graphics, all of the tables, and everything else that we put inside of that video. This is the PDF version of the course notes. They have a complete table of contents at the beginning. You can go through and find exactly the information you're looking for. And as we look at the course notes themselves, they are separated out starting with the very first video in our 220.1102 course, our 1202 course, the operating systems overview. Then we go to file systems. We have installing operating systems, upgrading Windows, Windows overviews, and more. So we're following the exact same format as the videos that are on our site. That makes them something you can have right next to you or follow along as the video is going. And of course, you saw the digital version on my screen. There's also physical editions of the course notes. The 1202 course notes are identical to the digital edition, but the physical edition obviously is printed out in this beautiful, perfect bound. It's what they call that soft binding in the back. Full color type views. It's exactly the same information and the things that you might want to find. It's a way that you can take along with you so that wherever you happen to be, you can pop it open on a train, read through all the information that's there. And of course, if you get the physical edition, we will ship this to you. But I also provide you with the digital edition for free. So as soon as you purchase this and you're waiting for it to be delivered, you can download the digital edition right away and start reading it without having to wait for anything to arrive in the mail. It's the best of both worlds. If you want to know more about this, we also have it available for our Core 1. So if you want to get both of those at the same time, you certainly could. The Core 1 and the Core 2, there they are. Those course notes are available on our website. You can look at more at professormesser.com/1202 notes, or simply find the main menu from our site and choose the Core 2 and the course notes, and you go exactly to the same place. I want to thank everyone for your support for these already. A number of you in the chat room have mentioned that you have the course notes. Thank you for your support, and it helps us keep this entire crazy experiment going. So thank you so much for that. Let's do another question, shall we? Next on our list is a question that asks, a Linux command. It says, a Linux administrator is using the DNF command from a server console. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be change file permissions, check available drive space, edit a configuration file, upgrade a software package, or view documentation for utility? All Linuxy sort of things, all command line working with operating system sort of things, but only one is the answer we're looking for. The question again asks, a Linux administrator is using the DNF command from a server console. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be to change file permissions, check available drive space, edit a configuration file, upgrade a software package, or view documentation for a utility? If you think you know the answer, go to professormaster.com/QA and lock in your answer. Should be a good one to look at. See if you know what this one happens to be. This might be good for those of you already familiar with Linux. There are a lot of Linux commands in this Core 2 exam objectives. There's a big list of Linux commands. We, of course, demonstrate every single command in our course. So if you're not familiar with DNF, you'd like to see somebody running DNF and see how it works, that's exactly what you would do, is to be able to use that. So make sure you go through and become more familiar with the Linux commands, you could get asked about what you would use on the exam, very similar to this question as well. Let's see how you did. The question asks, a Linux administrator is using the DNF command from a server console. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for this? Would it be to change file permissions, check available drive space, edit a configuration file, upgrade a software package, or view documentation for a utility? What did you choose? Let's find out. We can see that almost a majority of you, 49% of you, say the answer is to upgrade a software package. We have a tie for second place. 16% say change file permissions. 16% say to edit a configuration file. 11% say to check available drive space. We almost had double digits for the last one. 8% say view documentation for a utility. DNF is the answer that we were most interested in. DNF stands for Dandified Yum. Yum. Y-U-M. So DNF is a package manager, specifically in Linux. For those of you familiar with Yum, familiar with apt or apt-get, this is yet another one. If we're not good with Linux and anything, we're good at making multiple utilities that all do the same thing. Then we just keep changing them constantly. So here's the new one that you need to know, DNF, Dandified Yum. This is one that if you need to install a package, you need to remove a package. Maybe you're working in Linux, you're thinking, wait, I need Wireshark on this system. How could I get Wireshark installed? Can I even install it? Let's search for it. We'll go and type DNF, search Wireshark, and it shows me all the instances where it found packages that had Wireshark in them. For example, there's the full Wireshark.arch64. That is the network traffic analyzer that will capture packets for us. So that's the package that I would install, and I would run a DNF install of Wireshark.arch64, and that would install the package for me. That makes it very easy. You don't have to go to a third-party website. You don't have to download files. You don't have to compile anything. It makes it very easy to find what you need. Click a few keys on the keyboard, and now the application's installed. You didn't have to do anything else. Nice package manager to use. So if you're using Yum, you're probably already familiar with it. DNF has almost exactly the same syntax as Yum, so that would be an easy one to use. Yellow Dog Updater modified is Yum. These terms we use in Linux. You have to keep up. You gotta be familiar. Fortunately, we don't have to know the details of those terms. It's most important that you understand what DNF is, what it's used for. That's pretty much all you would need to know in this case. So the packages that it is installing are a standard format known as a Red Hat Package Manager, an RPM. So if somebody says, oh, you need to install the RPM for that. Well, where can I do that from? I could do that from DNF. See how easy Linux is? We just have to know all the abbreviations and you're fine. So if you're on your Linux computer and you need to install something, you could try Yum, you could try apt or apt-get, or you probably most commonly in the most modern versions of Linux, you'll probably be running DNF. That is the answer that we were looking for. DNF was what we were choosing for this. That would allow us to upgrade a software package, and indeed, the 49% of you that chose that one got it absolutely correct. There are other options in here, changing file permissions. So in Linux, that would be the command chmod, which changes the mode of a file, an odd name to describe a file permission, but that's how it's called in Linux, is a mode. So changing file permissions is chmod. 16% of you said to edit a configuration file. We could get into a fight. We could argue about which configuration file editor is the best. I would, of course, tell you it is Vim, and you, of course, would be wrong. If whatever you're using Nano, why would you use Nano? It's way too easy to use. You need a more complex editor that's very difficult, where you never know which keys to press, like Vim. It makes the day more interesting. That's why you should use it. 11% of you said to check available drive space. Well, if you were on your Linux machine, the df command is going to provide you with a view of that. Disk free is what df is. df-8 shows it in a human readable form, where it shows it in bytes, megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, and therefore the same thing. And we've got 8% that said view documentation for utility. That would be the man command. Man, that would be manual. M-A-N shows us the documentation. So if we did a man DNF, it would show us the documentation on how to use DNF, but it would not actually run DNF. Man is the utility that shows us the documentation. So in this case, the answer for DNF is to upgrade the software package. 49% of you chose that one. That is absolutely correct. That is what you would choose. For those of you that are watching this video to get that 1 hour of a webinar category CEU, your time has come. Now we can find out the best way for you to request this and to receive this as a digitally signed email from me. The way that you would do this is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a link there that says Contact Us. Really, it's Contact Me. It's coming directly to me. This is one that will bring up a form where you will put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put January 2026 Core 2. That way I know what study group it came from. And then in the body of the message, on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of this month, which are upgrade a software package. Upgrade a software package. That is the super secret code words of the month. You can put anything else in that email, that message block that you would like to. They all come to me. I do like to read through them, but you don't have to. You can simply put upgrade a software package, click send, and it will send it to me. That's all you have to do. I will then receive it on my side. It takes me about a week. I'll probably do it this weekend though. Probably go through all of these and send you an email that has been digitally signed by me that certifies that you were here for this 1 hour webinar category CEU. So that's what you would do. The steps that you must follow to earn it, again, are go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In there, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put January 2026 Core 2 or something close to that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Not quite the perfectionist with these. If you get it close, I'll be able to find it. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, you do have to get this one right. Upgrade a software package. Make sure that's in there and then just click send and you're done. That's what you would do. That's the best way to make that happen. I do usually take about a week to send these out. I hope to get these done this weekend. So we're shooting this on a Friday. So maybe tomorrow, the next day, you'll get this from me. So it'll be a pretty quick turnaround for these if you get it in right away. A great way to earn continuing education unit credits that you can then apply towards renewals or to other things that you might need a continuing education type of credit for. Let's do another question, though, because we do have time for more questions. And why wouldn't we? Let's do one that asks, many employees use the same password on different online services. Which of the following would help with this issue? Other than some type of punitive type thing, we could perform hash verifications. We could require HTTPS connections. We could enable the browser's pop-up blocker. We could use a private browsing mode, or we could install a password manager. One of these would be what we would want to use as our best option. The question again asks, many employees use the same password on different online services. Which of the following would help with this issue? Would it be to perform hash verifications, require HTTPS connections, enable the browser's pop-up blocker, use a private browsing mode, and install a password manager? This is one that we would definitely want to consider. If you are using the same password on different online services, shame on you. You should not be doing that. I know it's so easy, but there's better ways to keep things private. And in the after show, I can give you some examples of how this can be extremely important to you. I'll certainly be able to give you some scope and maybe some personal stories on how not doing this might save you a lot of time and a lot of effort. This might be a good one to step through. If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. And we'll see what you think the best option might be. Notice nothing on here said anything about hurting anyone. So we're good. All our users are fine. Our users will continue to be in perfect health. We just need to choose the right answer here. That's what we would do to make that happen. We'll have to see what the different options are for this. Let's see how you did with this question. Let's see. This one is, many employees use the same password on different online services, even though we told them not to, and they really shouldn't do that. Which of the following would help with this issue? Would it be to perform hash verifications, require HTTPS connections, enable the browser's pop-up blocker, use a private browsing mode, or install a password manager. I'm really hoping for 100% on this one. We're going to close this poll and see what you chose. We got close. 82% of you, but is it the right answer? Say to install a password manager. Is that the one we were looking for? 12% of you said perform hash verifications. We got 4% that said use a private browsing mode. 1% said require HTTPS connections. And 0% said to enable the browser's pop-up blocker. Nobody got my horrible answer. There's always a horrible answer I try to fit in all of these. And that is exactly where the horrible answer was on this one. 82%, that's hard to miss. And indeed, that is the answer we were looking for, installing a password manager. Now, why would that help? Obviously, as humans, we want to make this process of passwords as easy as possible. And quite honestly, also, our end user community may not be quite as knowledgeable with the concerns and the risks involved in having the same password across multiple services. You really can't blame them for that, but you need to give them a way that they could use different passwords that would make the process so much easier. So you would, of course, use a password manager. On my computer, they have password managers now that are built into your browser. There are password managers that come with different operating systems. I use a third-party password manager on my system. I've used a number of different third-party password managers through the years. What's great about these is they, in your browser, will recognize when there's a login prompt. They will then automatically add the username and password to that mix if you know the master password for the database. So you do have to remember one password that hopefully will be a very strong and very secure password, and that grants you access to all of those other credentials inside of that password manager. This also allows you to, when you are first registering or creating a password, it will create one based on your parameters. Whether you want it to be a certain length with digits, with special characters, you could have it as complex or as easy as you would like. That would be an easy one to be able to use. This database of passwords is also encrypted and stored securely. So even if somebody does get a hold of that particular database that you have stored of all of your passwords, they would not have direct access to any of them unless they did a brute force attack and be able to brute force the password that you used. I'm going to talk about that in the after show too. Somebody remind me of that one. We can talk about what happens when your primary database of passwords is obtained by the attackers, because that's what happened to me. And I'll tell you what I did in the after show. This allows you to create very unique passwords. Not very unique. There's no such thing as very unique. It's a unique password so that you can have different passwords on all of the different sites. And lastly, personal enterprise options, corporate access. There are different password managers, and there are password managers designed for the enterprise so that you can manage them, and then you can also make sure that everybody has access to these utilities. That's something that would be extremely useful and allow people to have different passwords on different services very, very, very easily. So that password manager is the right answer. 82% of you chose that one. 12 of you said to perform hash verifications. Hash verification commonly is used to check the status of a document, an email, or some other piece of digital media and be able to make sure that nothing has changed in that digital media. But it doesn't help you use different passwords on different online services. That's not what a hash verification is there for. 4% is to use a private browsing mode. Private browsing mode means that it's not going to access your previous browsing information, the cookies that you would normally have, but it doesn't help you use different passwords. You would still have the same password on all of your online services if you used a private browsing mode and you set up the same password on all of those services. Just a more private browser, but not a more secure browser environment. 1% of you said to require HTTPS connections. That would allow you to have an encrypted connection. These days, pretty much all of your connections will be HTTPS. The S is for savings. No, for secure. Had to be one of those, right? HTTPS is one that all of your web traffic would be encrypted to that site, which protects the transfer of the password hash as it's going to that website, but it doesn't require you to use a different password than another site. So that would not be what you would use. And lastly, you've got 0% that said use a private or enable the browser's pop-up blocker. Pop-up blockers will help prevent pop-ups, but will not help you use different passwords. You knew that already. 0% chose that one. The answer, the best answer here, the one that I chose, the one that you chose, the one that 82% of you chose, is to install a password manager. If you don't have a password manager, by the way, there are a lot of great free password managers out there. You really, really, really should be using a password manager if you don't use one already. There are many built into the browser that you are using. At a very minimum, use that one. Usually they are stored in the cloud so that no matter where you bring up that browser, your passwords are available. So important. So important. Make sure you do that. There's lots of things you can do around password managers. We'll talk about that as we in the after show. If you want to stick around for the after show, I'll be able to do that. It might help just a little bit. Let's now do another question. This next question, though, because here we are at the top of the hour already, but we're going to go after time. I've got a question I'd like to give you, but this one is a question from my practice exams book. My practice exams book is a book I wrote because I looked around the internet and I saw that there are a lot of practice questions on the internet. I've seen them. I think I've gone through every single one of them. One of the things I found, though, is they just aren't very good. A lot of the practice exams I found online were either questions that were really too simple. They weren't written in the same style or the same tone as the actual exam. And in many cases, they are asking about content and questions that are no longer part of the most current exam objectives. So you may be testing yourself on content that will never appear on the exam. What a waste of time for you. And of course, you do want to be sure that the answers on these practice questions are correct. A lot of times I find that the answers listed online are the wrong answers, probably put there by someone who really didn't understand the content itself. So I thought, let's write our own. I will write questions that sound and feel like an actual exam without it being actual exam questions. So you're safe here. You know you're getting high quality questions that are not violating any of your exam objectives and requirements. You also, inside of this list, have practice questions that are specific to the exam objectives. So I go through every single one of these books anytime there's a new set of exam objectives, and I make sure that every question is updated so that everything you're reading inside of this is accurate and up to date with the most current exams. Seems like that would be the simple thing for everyone to do. I've even seen things that you would buy on the internet that are not up to date that say they are. So one of the ways you could be assured of that is by getting this set of practice exams in both my Core 1 and Core 2 practice exams books. It's a great way to do that. So I have a question for you that comes from the practice exams book. I'm going to bring it up here. This is from my practice exams book, page 12 of the Core 2 exam book. And this is from practice exam A. It's question A32. And it asks, and again, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. An internal audit has found a server in the DMZ which appears to be infected with malware. The malware does not appear to be part of a file in the OS, and the malware runs each time the system is started. What type of malware would be most likely found on this server? Is it Trojan, ransomware, keylogger, spyware, or boot sector virus? Got a few to choose from here. All of these are different. All of these, of course, are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Now, this is a PDF, so one of the benefits of that is I can annotate. So if I see certain things in here that I would like to highlight, I can do that. If I have a stylus, I could write on the book itself, the digital book itself, and it stores it as part of the PDF. Nothing is restricted here. Nothing is locked out. You can use the full capabilities of the PDF to search, to print, and to do things you need to do so that you can study. Now, what this one also, you could, if you just want to know whether it's A, B, C, D, or E, you could go to the quick answer page on page 33. We're on page 12, remember. The details, which is what I'd like to show you, is on page 70. But if you've ever used PDFs before, you have to scroll to page 70 and then scroll back. But in this case, I put hyperlinks in the book itself. So if you click on where it says the details 70, it jumps to page 70. If I'm not in annotation mode, jumps to page 70. There we go. And there's page 70 is A32. There's the question. And it says the answer is E, a boot sector virus, and explains why the boot sector virus was the right answer. Now, if you got the answer right, that's probably the end of the story for you. I would recommend you still read through the other answers. But if you get the question wrong, it would be really nice to know why you got the question wrong. It's an opportunity to learn. Whenever you get a question wrong, whenever you do anything that's wrong, whenever something breaks, that's a chance for you to learn something. So inside my book, every single question not only tells you why the right answer is right, I also tell you why every wrong answer is wrong. This completes that learning loop so that you can choose the wrong answer, go to this page. Now you understand why that was the wrong answer. And if the topic of a Trojan, a ransomware, a keylogger, or a spyware shows up again, you'll be able to answer that question with the knowledge that you didn't have before. That is a much more powerful way to study in my mind. And in fact, I tell you, if you get the question right, be sure to read through the wrong answers just to verify that your thought process on why you thought the wrong answer was wrong is the same as my thought process. You might also find some information in here that you've now learned something you didn't know before about that particular topic. So there's a lot of value in a single question. Don't skip over it. Now, if you read that question, you're thinking, I don't know what any of this stuff is. I don't know what ransomware is. I don't know what Trojan is. I don't understand what you're saying. At the bottom of this is a QR code and a link that will take you to the video that I used to create this question. So it is also listed on the screen. It's from Objective 2.4 malware. You could, of course, go directly to that page. There's a QR code. So if you have the physical book, you just go to the physical book. You can scan that QR code and go directly to it. Or if you're on the PDF that I have here, the link is built in. You simply click the link. It will take you to that page. Once you are done with this question, you may want to go to the next question. You can go to the back button in your PDF reader. Just like a browser, your PDF reader probably has a back button. Mine does too. I'm going to click the back button, click, and we're back to where we started. And now we can go to the next question that's in the list. Those are my practice exam books. These are available for both Core 1 and Core 2. You can also bundle them with a set of course notes. If you bundle them together, you get a little bit of a discount. You might want to consider that as well. And of course, your purchase of these also helps to keep this entire thing going. Thank you so much for your support of this. If you want to learn more about it, go to professormesser.com/core2pe. Well, we have hit the top of the hour, but I also wanted to remind you, I promised you that I would tell you all about the exam objectives. These are extremely useful to have. Make sure you get your hands on these objectives. They are free on the CompTIA website. You simply go to professormesser.com/objectives. I give you direct links to the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus exam objectives. And I give you an image, a graphic there that shows you where on the page you need to scroll down to that red box to be able to put in your email address to be able to download these objectives. The objectives themselves, once you download them, have information on the exam itself, and they go through every single topic you need to know. These are the objectives. This is, in fact, what I use to make my video course. People often ask, do you cover everything in your video course? Oh, yes. Not only do I cover everything, every single bullet on this list is covered because I used this list to create the videos. That's how I know that 100% of everything you need to know for this exam is in my video course, because 100% of the exam objectives were used to create those videos. So it's a great way that you can verify yourself that the content that you are using to study is following the same format that CompTIA expects you to be following, and the exam objectives is really the best way to do that. Find out more about that, professormesser.com/objectives. That would be a great place to go to download and have those objectives. They really should be something you download and read through before you start your studies, but they also make a very good checklist before you book your exam, just to see if you really know everything you need to know before walking into that exam room. Find out more, professormesser.com/objectives. We do one of these study groups every week, every month for A+. We do 2 of them. I noticed I changed a date with my February study group that is not represented on the screen. And that is why it is so important that you go over to professormesser.com/calendar. professormesser.com/calendar gives you the most up-to-date, even more up-to-date than my live streams, apparently, because I did make a change to the Network Plus study group next month, and I did not make that change in my presentation. But it is changed at professormesser.com/calendar, and it is changed on, I believe, on my, I don't have it posted yet on our Discord, but it will be in the events channel of the Discord as well, and it will be the correct date there as well. These dates, though, change. And that's the important takeaway from this, is that even after this is over, these dates could change. So if you ever want the most up-to-date as to when the next event is going to be, professormesser.com/calendar. You could be watching this video well after February of 2026. In that case, go to professormesser.com/calendar and you'll know exactly when the next live event is going to be. Might be a good one to go through. Well, this brings us to the end of our first hour, but don't worry, there's more to come. We'll talk about more in the after show. I'll talk a little bit about what we are doing or what we have done with Password Manager since that came up today. I'll tell you about my story with the Password Manager and how I almost lost $10,000 because of my Password Manager. Oh, it's a good story. You're going to like that one. Also, don't forget about our course notes and practice exams. You can find it on professormesser.com/1220success. That is the link, or simply find the Core 2 course notes and practice exams from the main menu of the Professor Messer website. Discount vouchers and free exam hacks ebook at professormesser.com/vouchers. If you are in the US or Canada, can't beat a deal, and that is absolutely a deal at professormesser.com/vouchers. And of course, if you're on social media, we are too. Find us at your favorite social media site by typing in professormesser.com/ the name of the place you would like to find us, like professormesser.com/Discord. Why am I saying it that way? professormesser.com/X, professormesser.com/YouTube, professormesser.com/Instagram. I was already over it. We were 2 in and I was done. So I apologize already. This is the best place to go to find us online. And if we're not on your favorite social media site, certainly let me know. I should probably be there along with you, and I'll be glad to do that. You'd be surprised where you find us, though. You can do a /LinkedIn, /Facebook, /other things as well. It's all in there. Maybe it's just a little Easter egg. You'll have to find out which one it is. Well, that brings us to the end of the first hour, but not done yet. We've got more to come. We'll take your questions, and I'll talk to you more in the after show. Stay right where you are. We'll be starting that in just a few moments. In the meantime, thank you for joining us today on our Core 2 study group. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much. Now, if you are someone who is working through this, I sort of set up this piece with the Password Manager. Hold on a moment. Let me take a sip. It's an interesting story. And I think as we go through your questions, or before we get to your questions, I'll tell you a little bit of that story just so you can get a perspective of what's there. I want to find the information. And this is something that I think most of the password managers you will find out there are very good. But like any type of operating system, application, encryption, or anything else, there is a limit to the security that these things can provide. So you have to know, how much security am I getting from this, and what do I put at risk when I'm using these different security technologies? So one of the ones that came up probably most recently that is part of this story is one from LastPass. I'm going to bring up a story from December. This is one that was been updated. I think the breach itself was earlier in 2020. Actually, this is December 2025. There was an update. I'm trying to find the exact date, 2022. This is an article that I will bring up so you can see it here. There we go. So this is one with the password manager called LastPass. Like many password managers, LastPass includes the ability not just to store your passwords in an encrypted database on your system, but it also puts that same encrypted file on the internet. Now, it puts it into the cloud so that no matter where you log in, if you're on your mobile device, if you're on your desktop, if you're on a tablet, LastPass will securely store and will automatically fill the password fields that you are using on those different operating systems. Fantastic capability. It's one of the great advantages of using a password manager until the encrypted file itself is stolen. And that's what happened in 2022, this data breach with a third-party cloud storage. And they say that they had gained access to different pieces. There are actually a number of different LastPass breaches that have occurred. Breaches they're a fact of life in the world of IT security. There are things you can do, of course, to help prevent these things from happening, but all it takes is one weak link to be able to allow someone in to gather this information. There are a number of different data breaches. Actually, I'm not sure this is the data breach specifically that caused the problem with my LastPass, but I had at this time when this breach occurred, I had a LastPass database in the cloud. When I found out that the database itself could have potentially been breached, that somebody gained an access to my encrypted file, I first didn't worry too much because it's encrypted, right? That's why we use encryption, so that there's not going to be any problem. But I also knew that you can get around this by simply brute forcing the password. Now, I had a pretty strong password on my system. It was much more than 8 characters. I'm not going to go into details, but it had special characters. It was my primary password for a database that had quite literally over 1,000 accounts, 1,000 usernames and passwords inside of this database. I also store personal information in there about bank account information, things for cryptocurrency, because there's a little cryptocurrency that I've invested in along with other types of investments, certainly not 100%, but things that would allow someone to log into those sites if they had that particular database. So once I found out that it was breached, I took it as an opportunity to, one, use a different password manager going forward, for better or for worse. That was just a reactionary thing from my perspective. I don't feel that LastPass is any better or worse than their security than anyone else. This could have happened to anybody's password manager. It just happened to be LastPass that got it. I took the opportunity to use one that was a little more centric to the ecosystem that I use on my desktops. I'm primarily a Mac OS user, and 1Password is a very Mac OS centric password manager. And so I'd moved everything over to 1Password. There's a conversion process. It was very easy. But then we had the problem still of my encrypted file is out there. What happens when somebody does a brute force and figures out my password? Because that's not an if, that's a when. I don't worry if they are able to brute force my password. No, it's not if. When they brute force my password, what will happen? Well, I've got all the passwords for my website. I've got Amazon. I've got third-party sites that I have. I've got cryptocurrency sites that I'm doing. I do some crazy stuff with cryptocurrency and these other third-party utilities. I've got tax stuff that's associated with that. There's a lot of personal information there. So I took a weekend and started going through my LastPass, starting at the top of the list, and started going through every site that I've ever been on, that I ever want to have a different password, that I'm ever worried about. And I changed the password on every single one of them. I hit the big ones first. I hit the financial sites first. The access to my websites are first. I went through everything and I changed every password. I thought I changed every password. And here's where I almost lost $10,000 because of this. What happened eventually, maybe in about 3 to 6 months down the line, suddenly I started seeing some of my logins were having failed authentication attempts. And I thought, aha, I think they may have breached the password. I think they have brute forced my LastPass password. Don't worry, I've thought of everything. Until about a month after that, I got a message from a place where I have stored some cryptocurrency at a cryptocurrency brokerage, and they managed to find an API that I had not properly secured to be read-only, and they processed a transfer transaction using an API that I forgot to change the password on. There was one website that I missed. Remember, it's that very weak link I was referring to? That's me. I'm the weak link in this scenario. So fortunately, it was such a large transfer that I received an email because they didn't have access to the cryptocurrency site. They only access to a third-party site I used for taxes that accessed that cryptocurrency site through an API. You're going to have to peel that one apart later. So they used the API to send a message to the brokerage to be able to send and transfer that data. But because it was sort of convoluted, there was an automated process with my brokerage that sent me an email that said, hey, we received a message to send this much Bitcoin over here. Is that you? Or do you want to do something else? If that's not you, you should contact us. And immediately I contacted them and said, nope, not me. Nope, 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 nope. Where did this come from? And it took them a day or two to get back with me. They said, we've stopped this transfer. It did not occur. You did not lose the amount that was there. I think they actually tried to transfer USD. It was not Bitcoin. It was just a 10,000 USD. And there's a whole reason that was there, but we can kind of talk about that and being able to work through it. They said it came through this API, and I thought I don't even remember changing that password. Indeed, I did not. So I went through and changed the password. I deleted the API, created a new one that was read-only, and we're safe again. But just one weak link, one moment of not doing something you should have done could have some significant impact. So even though we are always saying, use this best practice, use a password manager, make sure that you've set it up this way, make sure that you follow all of the best security best practices with this as well to protect yourself and these passwords. No security system is foolproof. No password manager is foolproof. No firewall is foolproof. No operating system is foolproof. You still have to protect yourself. But there's a good example of how you would make that happen. There is not a function in the password manager to change all the passwords because the passwords are stored at the services. They're not, the password manager is just keeping those easy to find. They're sort of like a yellow sticky for you, a digital version of a yellow sticky that's secure. So that's great. But changing it in the password manager doesn't actually change it on that website. You have to go to Amazon.com and change your password. Then you have to go to ESPN.com and change your password. Then you have to go to WordPress.com and change your password. Then you have to go to every site. And quite literally, every site I have over 1,000 different logins in my password manager. So that's why I had to go to, fortunately, not all of them were up to date. Some of them were IP addresses that I used in a lab that were temporary things, but they were stored in my password manager to make it easy. So anything that had a 10 dot in it, I just deleted those. It really was a great opportunity to clean up my password manager, but it was also a good opportunity to make sure everything was safe and kind of nice to know that I have that in place. Here's a challenge though, and maybe this is not a best practice, is the multi-factor authentication that you will often integrate into these password sites. I also store my password manager. I know. It's more of a convenience thing. And so far it is a level of risk that I am willing to take, but it might be a better best practice to have your password manager in one place and your multi-factor codes in a different application. Ideally, that's the way I should do it. I recognize indeed when I'm the problem, and that's me. I'm the problem on that one. But something that's very useful. And of course, these days I'm using every site. I want to use multi-factor authentication. Every site I want to have a passphrase. Every site I want to have every security feature they have. And most of our password managers these days will integrate and work with whatever password and authentication process they have. So just be aware, password managers are phenomenal. You should be using them to some degree. I rely on them heavily to be able to do that. And you might want to try having your own. Maybe use one of the open source password managers, which are very good. There are many very good open source password managers out there, and you manage the files. Now, that doesn't prevent them from being stolen. It doesn't prevent a breach, but it's not just another way that you can have a little more control of the data that you might have available. Maybe you don't put that file online. There's different ways to do it. You find the way that works best with you, but that could have been very, 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 very bad to be able to do that. The fact they brute forced my password not on the services, they brute forced my LastPass password. They got a hold of my LastPass database in that breach, and that's what they brute forced, which effectively opened up my entire library, my entire catalog of every authentication, everybody's birthdays, social security numbers. They were all in there. I'm not silly enough to think that social security numbers are private anymore. They really are not. But that's a very good example of how this can happen very, very easily. You need to recognize when those things occur. And LastPass, they were nice enough to send out emails to everybody saying, we think there was a breach. Immediately when I saw that email, I thought, let's update some passwords. And I think that was a very good move. I could only imagine what would have happened had I not done that. And they get into those 1,000 different accounts. It would have been disastrous. We would not be here talking right now because they would have taken down everything that I had. All of my websites would be gone. It would have been a horrible mess. So just be careful and be aware that when you are relying on these technologies, there's always a disadvantage to go with the advantage, and make sure you are familiar enough with those. I will be taking your questions today, and now's the time when we do that. If you would like to submit a question, you can do that at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that is on your screen. There's a link at the top of the screen that talks about these. In fact, if you go to that link now, it tells you that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately, won't appear immediately until I put that in there. That's where you should go to submit any questions, and a number of you have that there. Some people were asking in the chat room, why didn't you just delete your LastPass account? It's too late. They already had the data. It was a breach. They took it. And in fact, I did delete my LastPass account. I deleted all of the, if you breach LastPass now, you will find I don't have anything in there that is listed. I deleted all of the accounts that I had inside of my LastPass when I moved to 1Password. So that's the problem. When somebody breaches and steals the data, there's nothing you can do at that point but react. And that's what I did. Let's go to your questions. You can do this at any time and go through all of these. This is, there's a lot here to choose from. A lot of questions you have sent in. Thank you for sending these. This is, there's a lot of questions that have come in regarding the exam itself and preparing for the exam. Let's talk about some of these because I think some of these could be really important. Let's start with one from Henry, who asks, greetings, professor. I'm trying to get my first job in IT. I passed my 1201 and just passed my 1202 yesterday. Yay. I need a soundboard. We need applause. We need some horns. Congratulations on your brand new A+ certification, Henry. I don't have any professional experience in IT. I've been doing home labs, for example, creating an Active Directory server. How or where do I document what I have been doing to show employers that I'm trying to gain experience besides just having stories to tell without having an IT job before? Thanks for all you do. Well, let's talk about getting that first job in IT. I will, of course, reference you or send you a reference here in the YouTube video description of this video, of all of my study group videos. There's a link to a video I created called How to Get a Job in IT with No Experience. Certainly fits this question from Henry. And I give you some broad concepts of things that are important to keep in mind, but I also talk about specifics. I do talk about home labs, for example, as part of that and how important it is, but I also talk about what you can do with those. Why is a home lab valuable? I did stuff in a home lab. Who cares when I go to the interview? How did they know what I did in a home lab? I give you some examples in that video. It's a 30-minute video. It's a big video. But as you know, I don't have any downtime in this video. It is constant information. So it is 30 minutes of chock full of information. So make sure you go through that. But I'll give you a summary here, especially as it fits to home labs and how this would work. First, the people who are interviewing you for an entry-level position in IT, they already know you don't have experience in IT. They're not looking for people with experience because then they'd have to pay them more. They can pay you less. So they want someone with less experience for that particular role. And at some point, the organization needs to hire people as an entry-level position because no one else will work in those jobs once they have experience. It's just one of the things you have to keep in mind as you're going through this. So first, don't worry so much that you don't have experience. They know you don't have experience. That's not the issue. What you have to do is market yourself in a way that positions you above what everyone else with no experience has. You may think, well, how do you position yourself as being a better hire than other people when all of you have no experience? Well, you do that by making your own experience. And I think home labs is a great place to do that. as I've mentioned in other study groups, the interview process is a chance for you to talk a lot and tell stories. The person interviewing you doesn't really want to talk much at all. They want to ask the question and you need to run with it for 5 or 10 minutes. So you need to have an answer already in place for the things they might ask. Take the most common types of questions. Take a question that is, so tell us about a time when you ran into a technical problem and what you did to correct it. That's a great question for an entry-level position. Even though you don't have professional experience, nobody's paid you for a job yet, there are still things that you have experience with in your own home lab. For example, Henry talked about setting up an Active Directory server. Now, during the process of installing that Active Directory server, turning it on for the first time, working through the Active Directory utilities, maybe you even also created a separate Windows 11 VM and you connected the Windows 11 workstation to your Active Directory infrastructure. Anywhere in that process, did anything ever go wrong? The answer is yes. Many, many things went wrong during the setup process, during the trying to get Windows 11 to find the Active Directory server, trying to get configurations and services running on the Active Directory server, just trying to find where the group policy editor is can be challenging. So all of these problems you run into are perfect opportunities to document. Anytime you run into a problem, you should always be doing a screenshot. You should always take a picture of this. You should always have some type of documentation every time there's an error. And you should write down what happened, what you researched, and how you resolved it. There's your story. That is one that is powerful information, and we don't often consider it in the moment. Which means when the problem is happening, we seem to be more focused on solving the problem than looking at it as an opportunity to create a story. So you should absolutely use it as an opportunity to create a story. It's going to be super important as you're sitting in that interview chair and they ask you, tell us about a problem you ran into. And what a great lead this is. Well, I installed an Active Directory infrastructure in my home lab. Already, the person interviewing you is going to be, oh, we use Active Directory. We're very familiar with Active Directory. In fact, you're probably being hired for a help desk position where you'll be using a lot of Active Directory and changing people's passwords and setting permissions and looking at configurations. That's very common part of a very entry-level help desk position. So already you are using things at home that are identical to the software they're running in these enterprise. And that's something I think we don't often think about. We think that the things we use at home are very different than things they use in a big, big company. If you go to a company of 50,000 people, certainly it's different than what you're running. Well, they're just running Windows 11. They're running Active Directory. They're installing things maybe in a different way that makes it more efficient and automated, things probably you aren't doing at home. But they are using Active Directory. They're using Group Policy Editor. They're setting policies in Group Policy Editor. They're pushing out those policies to the workstations, which is exactly what you could do at home. So this is a chance for you not only to talk about you've worked with technologies that they are familiar with and that you are expected to be familiar with in this new role, but now you also have a story of the things that broke. I guarantee you, by the way, that if you're someone who is installing Active Directory Server for the very first time and you're trying to integrate a Windows 11 device into that Active Directory infrastructure, you're going to run into a DNS problem. Because of course, you're going to run into a DNS problem. That's what DNS does. It breaks things for us. So you have to resolve that DNS problem. I'm not going to give you no spoilers, but you have to resolve the DNS problem in some way so that that machine can finally see the Active Directory server and be added to the Active Directory server configuration. You probably would also run into authentication problems, where this information is stored, so many different issues. But what a great thing to talk about during the interview. Oh, when I first installed this Active Directory server has been amazing. I've been able to push out policies. I've got different machines connected to it. I've been able to create some very interesting login scenarios with this. I've set up some standards for my passwords, but you won't believe the mess I ran into when I first installed it. Let me tell you a story of what I did. And there goes the story. Now you can talk all about that. So you're telling them about something that happened to you, but they're also listening into the process you went through to troubleshoot that. I ran into this error. It was an error. I took a screenshot of it. I took that screenshot, put that information into Google. It provided me with a link on the Microsoft website. The first link didn't provide me with what I wanted because it was a previous version of Active Directory and Active Directory Server. But the second article I read had information in it that made me think about the DNS settings, and therefore I did this. So in fact, you could even go deeper into it. They go, well, why was DNS a problem? Well, let me tell you why. And then you can talk about how Active Directory uses DNS and why that's important. So even though you don't have a professional career, you've never been hired at an organization to work in IT before, you've done things in your home lab that are very similar to what the people in that company are doing today with Active Directory. And certainly something that, do you think everybody walking in for these interviews is going to be able to say things like this? The answer is no. No, they are not. You're going to have stories and a perspective that other people walking in the door don't have because you did the work. None of this comes easy. And some might say you got lucky, but there is that, what is the adage that talks about luck is just something you've prepared for? I don't know what it is, but you've done all of this preparation and suddenly the job comes along. How lucky I was to get that job. How lucky was it that they offered the job to me? It wasn't luck at all. You worked really hard to learn that content. You went above and beyond what other people are doing. Of course, they're going to offer the job to you. So that's my recommendation, is to write down everything. Have a story for everything. And don't just have one installation of things you've done. Maybe install Active Directory, maybe then install WordPress on Linux so that you can have Windows and Linux on the same thing. So for WordPress, you're going to need a Linux installation. You're going to need a database like MySQL. You're going to need to install the WordPress application. How do you do that? It's not going to work when you first try to get it running. What broke? How do you fix it? There's another story. But it's in Linux this time, so you can show that you're very familiar with these different operating systems. Might be also good to get a little Mac OS knowledge under your belt too. If that organization uses Mac OS, that would be a valuable thing as well. So you can just keep going with this. Just keep adding on those capabilities. And I think that that will help you quite a bit when you walk into the room and somebody says, let's talk about what you know and what you've done. Well, great. Maybe you've got 3 stories in your back pocket. You know, that's what you do. Let me pull out the first story and let's talk about it. Right? Not literally pull out, but you know what I'm saying. You've stored that in your brain. Now you can tell a big story about that. Another thing you might want to do is have some visual aids. Bring a screenshot of the error. Bring a list of the policies that you've pushed out. This helps a lot. There was a story I used in that video of how to get a job in IT with no experience. So I talk about installing a firewall and then run a report on that firewall for the last 24 hours once it's been installed for a day, and find out things like how many attacks has it blocked? What types of attacks did it block? How many times did malware try to infect your systems from this internet connection? There will be plenty to talk about. And what if you pulled out the report that's got a graph on it showing the number of attacks over time and what those specific attacks were? And here's what I found. When I did nothing else but plug in a firewall, I had 2,000 attacks on my system in a 24-hour period. Probably had more than that. But you have a report now showing that. I can tell you, corporate America, we love reports. We love them. We love some reports. If you're able to create reports, if you're able to show someone a report, that's like money. That is some good stuff to have a report that you can just, here, that's yours. You can keep that one. That was just a little thing I ran. I've got other reports I did that talk about application usage, VPN usage, and other capabilities. You could just keep going with this. So many stories just come from these little home labs you have. So home labs, yes, a little bit of it is you working by yourself in the room and you're working on the stuff and you're doing it. And it's helpful to understand. But that process is valuable content that could possibly get you a job. Let's find some other questions that you have from this. There's a lot of odd. You also have some very odd questions this month. Thank you for sending in your odd questions. I do not thank you for sending in your odd questions. Just an interesting one to go through. There were questions, we talked a lot about Windows utilities in our performance-based question this month. In our videos, we show these utilities, we talk about the utilities, but then we also demonstrate these utilities. So if you are looking at Task Manager and all the little tabs of Task Manager, which are specifically listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives, make sure that you recognize the tabs you need to know, but you've also used them. Part of knowing what these utilities do is that you're able to interpret the results from these utilities. So running Task Manager, a lot of people will simply open Task Manager, sort on the highest utilization, and now they know which application's using the highest utilization. There's so much more to Task Manager. There's all those other tabs. There's network information. We can find out about services. We can change startup information. There's a lot in there. So make sure you're familiar with every single tab. And if you see something on the screen that you don't recognize, go do some research on that. Find out, what does that do? Why is that there? It's one of the reasons I left in the performance-based question the part about program files being deleted, because that's the term they use in the disk cleanup utility. So that's another one of those cases where you really do want to be very familiar with the utilities themselves, not just in what they do, but what they are showing you, so that you can then know how to use them when you're troubleshooting a system. Another interesting way to go about understanding what might be presented to you on these exams, and that might be something that can certainly help you with your studies. It'll help you throughout your entire career. A lot of times we just worry about, do you know it for the exam? Do you know Task Manager for your job, for what you do? You'll be using these utilities the rest of your career. So make sure you are familiar with them. How are we doing on time? I should probably put up a clock, or I'm just going to keep talking and talking and talking. Let's go to the next question on our list. I guess I have to find the next question on our list. I think some of these questions are gotcha questions. Thank you for sending in your gotcha questions too, which I will not be answering. Thanks for sending them in. I get so many interesting questions. I could almost do a live stream on the emails I get. Sometimes it sometimes gets a little bit unusual, a little bit weird. Let's keep going through this. We've got, let's go through. Here's a good one. Here's one that we can really fight about, as if there's not enough contention. Let's add some more. This one from my good friend Anonymous, who says, I just installed a Windows 11 VM to practice on. Good for you. Fantastic. You should. Well done. The question continues. Which Linux distribution would you recommend for practice? Ooh, this is a gotcha question for sure. No matter what I say, I will receive the ire of the Linux people who don't like my answer. I'm fine with that, really. I'm fine with ire. You can send your ire to james@professormesser.com. Be glad to accept your ire. This is one, you sort of get that. If you talk about Linux online, you're going to get somebody talking back to you about Linux online. It's just the nature of the beast. Windows doesn't quite have that appeal, if you will. Which Linux distribution would I recommend to practice? There's a lot of good ones out here. If you are installing it as a desktop, there's some great stuff out there. Some of the most well-known are Ubuntu. That's probably one of the most well-known desktop Linux distributions. It's almost foolproof in its design, but that's not necessarily the best thing to learn on as something that's foolproof. But if you're looking just for a good daily driver Linux machine, if you're a Linux-ish kind of person, that's certainly one you can choose. Mint is a very good one. Has a lot of look and feel to Windows in how the user interface is set up. That might be a good one to try. Or you may be more interested in doing this from a pure server perspective. And for those of you that have worked in a Linux administration role, you know that we don't work with these fancy graphical user interfaces. We don't have things to click on the screen. It's all at the command line. So you might want to install Mint to try the desktop environment and really understand how an end user would use Linux. But then I would highly recommend installing a sort of a headless server type of Linux configuration, which boots to the command line, but still is able to run all of the services you would normally do. I'm a Linux administrator for ProfessorMesser.com. It's all Linux type systems. So when I log in, I just get a command prompt. And then I have to do everything at the command prompt, install applications, change configurations, modify where the files are stored, set up cron jobs, do all the things you would normally do on your system, but do it from the command prompt. So you might want to try both just to see how easy or how hard it might be. There's a lot of great Linux distributions out there. I think for server-based Linux distributions, I'm in the past I've used CentOS, which is a Red Hat derivative, to be able to do this. And Red Hat has decided not to support CentOS in the same way that they had normally been doing it. So there are a number of CentOS alternatives these days. What was I planning to install recently? There was a distribution. The one that I think I was looking at most recently, I have tried Rocky Linux. That was one option there. What was the other one? Starts with an L. Somebody help me. I'll have to figure out which one of those it was. But there are so many to choose from. You can't go wrong. It was Alma Linux, so it had an L in it. That's what it was. You're absolutely correct, sir. The chat room has saved the day again. Alma Linux, Rocky Linux, those are two good CentOS types alternatives that would be great to install and try out from a server perspective, just to give you a feel of that. So that's what I would choose. I look forward to your angry cards and letters regarding my choice of Linux options, and you're absolutely right. That's all I can really say. This just takes care of everything. You send back the message. Yep, you're absolutely right. End of thread. Well, we can't have an argument? What good is this? What good is Linux if we can't argue about it? Sorry, I'm just not in the mode where I argue about Linux. I do so much Linux administration, Windows administration, Mac OS administration that I don't care which operating system you use. Let's just use what makes sense for the task that you have at hand. So I'm fine with Linux. Yeah. I'm also good with Windows. Sure. Yeah, I like Mac OS. Yeah. So I'm not a good person to argue with, because I'll agree with you every time that there are goods and bads about all of these operating systems. And then we're sort of done. The conversation is over. Although I love talking about the nuances of the different versions. How's Alma Linux different than Rocky Linux? Why shouldn't I be using something else? Should we even consider this other type? These are great conversations to have. And with a bunch of technical people, they can be kind of fun too. Next question that we have in our list, because we still have some time left. The Debian people have shown up and said, see, what you should be using is one of these Debian or Debian alternatives. Yep, you're right. You're absolutely correct. You should. Now we're done. So much for that one. Let's keep going through your list and breaking these things down. We can certainly get a feel for this. Let's talk about planning for the future. This is a question from Anonymous, who says, hello, Messer. I'm a student in cybersecurity vocational class working towards CompTIA certifications, among other things. Passed my 1201 a while back. Going to take my 1202 in 2 weeks. Fantastic. I also plan to head to a college for a bachelor's degree in cybersecurity. Is there anything more I should do to make myself stand out in a job market, especially for when I get out of college? We've talked about home labs a little bit. That's certainly something you should do, is have a home lab set up. Go to Reddit. There's a home lab subreddit. They talk all about systems, software configurations, where to store this information. That's a great place to go. The other question is, or the thing I'm thinking about in my mind, are things beyond the scope of home lab. And one of the things that is so important when you're trying to get your first job in the industry is certainly your knowledge and your background. And it sounds like you're focusing on those things and you're doing a very good job. You're getting certifications, you're getting formal degrees. Fantastic. That fits the first of those 4 elements that I talked about for getting a job in IT with no experience. The third element in that list, by the way, is that you've done a home lab. So there's 3 things we've talked about today: getting an industry certification, getting a formal degree, doing a home lab. So what's the 4th one? What is the 4th and in some cases most important element for getting your first job in IT if you have no experience? The 4th element is that you know someone who works there. That's an interesting one. I think in my career, in IT, I had, I don't know, 10 or 15 different jobs or positions in different companies. So this is my entire career, and it spans multiple companies. And in some cases, I had different roles within the same company because I was there long enough. So when I say 10 or 15, it's really 5 different companies, but there were multiple jobs in there throughout the way, maybe 6 different companies. The thing that is hard sometimes to know is, how do you meet someone who's already working there? We drive by these big buildings on the interstate. Oh, there's a big building. Look at the name at the top of there's another big building. Look at that one. That's a big company. I wonder how many people are there. And you ask your phone, how many people work in that company? 25,000 people. Ooh, it must have a big IT group. That's 25,000 people. One of them you should know. This should not be difficult. But where do you meet someone from such a big company? Where would you even understand how to introduce or find someone who works there? Well, as they often say, instead of waiting for the mountain to come to you, you should really go to the mountain and find out. This is probably one of the best ways to do it. Find out where those people go. And many times the people in those organizations go to user group meetings. It might be a Microsoft user group meeting, a Palo Alto Networks user group meeting, a Cisco user group meeting. There's probably, if you're in a relatively large area, a large city or metropolitan area, they probably have one or more of those that are taking place. They're easy to find on the internet, and you should go to them. They're usually at night, after hours, after work. You go there. They often provide some type of food and drink, and they have a presentation on some interesting new technology, which is always interesting. But perhaps more importantly, there's an opportunity at some point during that session to meet the people that are there. And this is where you get to make yourself known to these folks, and you get to know who they are. You introduce yourself. Oh, I haven't been to one of these before. Have you been to one of these things before? Oh, yeah. I come to all these all the time. No kidding. So how long have you been coming to these user group meetings? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, where do you work? There's your conversation. There's your starter. Now you can have a conversation about that. Oh, I've seen your building. Yeah, I've driven by that big building. Don't you have like 25,000 employees? And then you can have a conversation. I'm looking to get a job in IT. Knowing what you know about your organization hiring people at entry level, what are some things you would recommend to me that I should be doing? And they'll tell you, oh, you should make sure you have this certification. We really like people who know this particular software. If you interview with us, they're going to ask you about this. And by the way, if you're planning to interview with us, why don't you give me your resume and I will give your resume to HR. You will find that people in the user group meeting are asking you for your resume sometimes before you even ask them to take your resume. Why are they doing that? Are they just nice people? Well, they probably are nice people. But another thing that these large companies do is they want to minimize the cost for hiring people. They could go outside the organization to a recruiter, but if they hire a person the recruiter bought to them, they have to give the recruiter a percentage of their annual salary as a finder's fee. That can be expensive. So what they internally do is they have an employee program where they have their employees be the recruiter. The employees bring resumes to HR, and if they end up hiring that person, they give a bonus to the person who gave the resume to HR. The internal person who already works there. So it's a win-win. You get a job at this place. The person who recommended you gets a finder's fee, usually a couple $100, but it's a lot less than paying a recruiter. And they ended up getting someone that they knew because they obviously were someone that had your resume. So often they will ask you for a resume and you didn't even have to do anything. You say, oh, well, I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. We'll stay up to date. Make sure you are putting things on LinkedIn. Make sure you're making posts. Oh, I added this to my home lab today. Just put a screenshot. Put something there that lets people know the things you're working on, the technologies that you're working on. I guarantee you the people that are hiring are going to look at your LinkedIn. So why not make this kind of a showcase for the things that you know? And it can be very directed and it's very, very useful. So There are things you can do. Meet these people. I've worked in IT for all of my career. Right out of college, even inside college, I was working in IT. And one of the things that I have found really internationally, everywhere I went, in every organization I worked with, is that the technical people in these organizations are great people. They're nice people. They want to help other people with the technologies. And you will find yourself, this is what we do all the time. I'll go to a training class and I'll sit with these people all day in the training class talking about these topics. And then after the training class is over, it's usually something out of town, we go to the bar and have Coca-Cola and talk about technology or something related to technology. And it's interesting getting that level of connection with people that have a similar interest as you. And if you're able to make that happen in a study group session and you show up for more than one, you go to the study group the user group meeting every month, go to the Cisco user group meeting, the Microsoft user group meeting, you see these people over and over again. So during the interview, you can say, when I was talking to Bob in IT, he works in the building next door with your organization. I see him all the time, the Cisco user group meetings. We're good friends, me and Bob. We were talking about, you have a big project dealing with the cloud or dealing with imaging or dealing with this software. And you can talk about that. And that's another check mark that says, oh, you're someone who's not only familiar to what we do here, you know people that work here. We are much more willing to hire people we know than just a stranger that has walked in the door. So you can help yourself quite a bit by getting a relationship, just a professional relationship with these folks. You don't have to hang out with them on the weekend. You don't have to go to their kids' birthday parties, but you know them professionally. You have met them. They're an acquaintance. There's someone who you've talked technology with. That can be a very, very valuable asset. Maybe even more important than your industry certifications, your formal degree, or your home lab. Maybe. It's not always the case, but it helps. All of those different elements work together. Hopefully you have all four, not leaving any of those out, but it certainly puts you in the best position that you could possibly be in. And that's all you're really hoping for. At that point, it's up to the people making the decision. They might decide your way. They might not decide your way. I'm pretty good at rejection at this point. First, I'm a guy, and secondly, I've had a lot of jobs in IT, super good at rejection. And I'm on the internet now. I'm really good at rejection and anger. That is something that can really help you in the interview process. So if it doesn't work for that first interview, maybe another company you go to and talk to them, eventually you will be placed at the top of that list. So you should do everything you can to make that happen. That's my recommendation for going above and beyond your industry certification, above and beyond your formal education, and above and beyond your home lab. Those would be things to consider. Let's keep going through our list of questions. Oh, this is a good one. This is one I think about a lot, and I'll tell you why in a moment. This is from B. B says, as beginning IT professionals, should we get business cards? If so, what should they say? Especially if you don't have a job in IT yet. Well, if you don't have a job in IT, you don't need a business card yet. Not quite. And these days, a lot of what we do is online. Yeah, join my LinkedIn. Once somebody gets on your LinkedIn, you don't need a business card. That's how you pretty much keep up with everybody and where they go these days. And one of the things I've done on my LinkedIn, and I will apologize to all of you now. If you've gone to my LinkedIn page, we have a Professor Messer LinkedIn page that is for this. But there's also the James Messer LinkedIn page that is my personal LinkedIn page that describes my previous positions and what I have done. And you can see all the work I did as a systems engineer at Palo Alto Networks and a systems engineer at Network Associates and NetScout and Network General and all these different jobs that I've had in the career over the years. That's really how I keep up with people. And when I need to connect with someone, I just send them a LinkedIn message. So no matter what job they're at, what email they have, where they are, what their phone number is now, they'll be able to get my message and we can have a conversation. And it works great. That's a great way to keep up with people. What I have done on my LinkedIn is only add people to my personal LinkedIn that I have directly worked with in the past. So these are my personal associates, people that I have had direct communication with at these different companies. I don't tend to accept LinkedIn requests from anybody that I don't know or that I have not worked with, because that's not the purpose of my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is to keep my network available and one that I can send messages and find people and see what's going on with them. So that's my recommendation to you as well. If you don't have a LinkedIn yet, you should do that. It is sort of the de facto standard of professional online profiles. And that's something that is very, very useful. And you can bend that to your use by putting your own posts on LinkedIn. You think nobody's watching? Oh, they're watching. And having that information on LinkedIn can really position you quite well during the interview process, especially if you put that LinkedIn right on your resume, put it on your CV, so they see, there's my LinkedIn. You should go look at it. I got some good stuff out there. You can even say that during the interview. If you'd like to know more about the software I've used, or you'd like more insight into my troubleshooting and how I do that, I have a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. You should check it out. They go, oh, okay, I'll go to LinkedIn. That'd be good. We'll see there. I guess that's my that's the interviewer. That was my interpretation of every interview I've ever had. Not true. I've had some very good interviews with very fun people. The best interviews are the ones where it's more casual. You can talk more openly and a little more personally to someone who's in the room. The interviews I don't like are the ones around, there's 5 people in the room. It's kind of a conference, all 5 on 1. They're shotgunning questions at you, looking for a particular answer. I tend to try to stop those before they get started by just talking and asking questions directly of the people at the table. And trying to get them out of their mode of asking questions and just having a conversation, because I think that's how those should go. And if you're able to do that, you're able to bend the room in your direction. It does help quite a bit to make that happen. All of this is kind of difficult. There may be times I have gone to classes that have been sponsored by my employer that teach me how to talk to people. Yep, there are classes for this. The classes I took were from an organization called Decker, Decker, I believe. Can I find it real quick? Decker Training, Decker Communications, Decker.com. Am I in the right place? Decker Communications, Coaching, Consultancy, or Consulting and Training, Decker.com. So that is the organization that I took a course from. I was required to go to this course from Decker, and I thought, oh, I got to go to a class on how to talk. This sounds awful. This sounds like an awful use of my time. It's the middle of winter, though. It was in Chicago. I thought, okay, well, I got to go. I'll do this. I'm not going to like it, though. And we went, and it was a great course. It was so good. It was so different. It was one of those you've probably seen these before, where you have to present something for a minute, for 60 seconds. And they have a video recording of this. They capture it on video. And then after it's done, we all look at you and say what you did wrong, which you think would be bad, but it's actually fun because everybody has to do it. You know, the first person's kind of, but as you get into it, we are all on board with tracking these things. But it's simple things sometimes, such as how do you start a conversation? Or during conversation, what are the types of things that you say? To the level where when you are standing in front of a room talking, what do you do with your hands? I always see people taking pictures and they're grabbing their hands and they're in front of them. You ever see it's almost like they're protecting themselves against the camera, taking their image. I think it's natural as humans. We sort of try to protect ourselves. So they clasp their wrist in front of them. And it's like a psychological, I'm protecting myself from this awkward picture that's being taken right now. In reality, your hands should just dangle at your side. Just hang them down to the side of you. And if you've ever spoken for 60 seconds with your hands at your side, it feels weird. It feels unusual because I feel like I should be protecting myself. So this was what this training was about, was to get you out of the box and out of these habits, these bad habits you had that detract from how people interpret what you are saying, and you create new habits that are much more directed and able to communicate better to people. Now, my particular role was a systems engineer on the pre-sale side. So most of what I did every day was to walk into a room, plug in my laptop, and give a presentation and show a live demonstration. So communicating with people was one of the most important parts of my job. Wait, you were working for one of the most advanced firewalls in the world. You had to be an expert in the operating system and the troubleshooting and implementation and design of these systems. You also had to understand all of the technologies around it that interact with this, the integration into Active Directory, how you would implement it into a routed network, a switch network, a layer 1 network. All of these things you have to know. And communication was the hardest part of my job. How's that? How's that sit? So because it is so difficult, this communication part, if you spend any amount of time improving your communication skills, it's going to help you through your entire career, regardless of what job you have. So I've often said, especially in my A+ course, that we work a lot with computers, but that's not what our job is about. Our job is about how we can help people with these computers. The computers is just a means to the end. It's just a process and a method that allows us to solve some type of problem. We don't just use computers because computers exist. We use computers and networks and technology because there's a problem that we're trying to solve. If you work for an insurance company, you're trying to protect people against some type of disaster and give them some type of leverage should that disaster occur. If you're working in medicine, you're trying to keep people healthy. If you're working in transportation, you're trying to get things across the country or across the world so that people are able to run their business or solve a problem that they have with what you're transporting. Or you may be transporting them. There's another problem that needs to be solved. Regardless of what company you work for, there's a problem that needs to be solved. And it's not, am I running the latest version of Windows? That's not the problem. We're using the technology to perform a function, and we need to be more familiar and we need to be more understanding of what those problems are. Very early in my career, I worked for an insurance company, John Alden Life Insurance. They don't exist anymore. They were bought and integrated into a different company. That was in Miami, worked right at the airport at MIA. And for the first couple of years working there, I started in their service desk, is what they called their help desk. And the first couple of years, I really wasn't sure what we did. I really wasn't clear on the concept of what type of insurance we had, why are we printing all of these things and mailing them out every month? When the printers broke, it was a disaster. It was all hands on deck because of a printer that broke. Like, what is it? What is so important that printer is? But because everything was done on paper at the time. It was we had just come out of the world of putting everything on stone. And so we were printing it on paper and we were sending it to our customers. But what was on the paper? What did we do? What were we providing? What was the problem we were solving? And it took me a while to kind of get into the world of insurance and understand the nuances of it. And, oh, this is what this department does. This is what accounting does. This is what the actuarials do. This is why it's important. These are the customers that we have. This is why they rely on us. Every company is this way. Sometimes it's very obvious. If you work for an auto manufacturer, it's pretty obvious what you're doing and why it's important to get those autos and why all of the different manufacturing processes that are important. If you're at a hospital, it's probably very important why the networks have to be up 100% of the time at this hospital. But sometimes you get into these jobs where there's not a direct link between IT and what the business is doing. And you will hear and see this all the time from companies that want you to be more familiar with the business. Yes, you are in IT, but how does IT help the company or the organization with its primary goals? And you probably need to spend as much time on that as you spend understanding getting in your role during that first 3 months with the company, so that you can then start understanding why it's important to have that password reset on the weekend, why it's important that script runs, why it is important that particular document get into the hands of our third party, because it keeps this whole process going that solves this problem for our customers. Keep that in mind, that it's not all, we love technology. I love technology. I love gadgets. I love everything that has to do with the digital world. I'm that kind of person. but I also recognize that there are bigger problems that need to be solved, and this is the technology that solves those problems. That's pretty powerful. And if on top of that, you can not only manipulate and understand and be the magician behind the technology, but then you can also be the communicator of all of that, that's unbeatable. You will have a long and storied career in this business if you focus on those. And I think that's a great thing to spend time on, is being able to communicate with people even better. That helps you not only in business, it helps you in every other part of your life as well. Well, I think that's a good place to end up today. We went 2 hours and no power outages. Thank you so much for whatever you did to make that happen. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us in that first hour as well. We have such fun doing the Q&A. You guys did great on the questions today. Thank you for joining us and participating. And thank you for your questions in our after show as well. We always have a good time. Come on back next week. We have our Network Plus study group on Wednesday of next week. We're shooting this on a Friday. So by Wednesday, we'll have brand new Network Plus questions written. We'll do this again with all the questions in the first hour. And I will, of course, take your questions in our after show in hour 2 on Wednesday as well. Thank you for being here and joining us. Welcome to 2026. It's going to be a great year. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on our A+ study group. Thanks, everybody.